Hello, everybody, and welcome to a conversation between Forward Party and Open Primaries. My name is Ali Backscheider. I am the brand director at Forward Party, and I am joined by my friends from Open Primaries, Jeremy and Dariel, as well as my colleague Cesar from Forward Party. So, Jeremy, do you mind introducing yourself and telling people what you do for Open Primaries?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Jeremy Gruber. I'm the Senior Vice President at Open Primaries. We're a national nonpartisan organization working to open the primaries in all 50 states and let all voters vote for who they want in every election.
Love it. Cesar, do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Hi, my name is Cesar Marquez, and I'm the state lead for the Nevada Forward Party. And then I'm also one of the people working on the Yes on 3 ballot measure to pass open primaries and ranked choice voting.
Amazing. Last but not least, Dariel.
Hi, my name is Dariel. I work with Jeremy at the Open Primaries Education Fund through Students for Open Primaries to conduct research on how primaries affects young voters, and also spread the message about primaries and how beneficial they are to young voters. And I currently a first year at the University of Chicago studying policy.
Experiencing your first winter.
Experiencing my first winter. I should have started off with that one.
Oh, man. Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to this conversation. What we're going to be doing is talking about open primaries. You just had this amazing survey result come through where you polled different Gen Z millennials about, what makes them tick with politics. So Dariel's going to share a little bit about that and his findings. And Cesar's going to talk about a big win that he had. I keep saying Cesar saves democracy. Nevada, yes on 3. So Cesar's going to explain what that means. But before we dive into all of that, Jeremy, could you just give a quick overview of, what does open primaries even mean?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different forms of open primaries, but at its core, open primaries means allowing all voters to participate in the primary election. And there's different ways you can do that. There are states with partisan primaries that allow independents to vote in the primary. There are states that have nonpartisan voter registration. Everybody picks a party ballot. And then there are states with nonpartisan primaries, which hopefully Nevada will be in two more years, where there's just one ballot. There's no more Republican or Democratic primary. Everybody votes, and the top candidates go on to the general election. We support all forms of open primaries. We believe every voter should be equal. We pay for the primaries. And it's really important that we ensure that voters from the very beginning of the election cycle are helping set the agenda and pick the candidates that are going to come to serve us later on.
Love it. And that's why we're such good friends, Forward Party and Open Primaries, because that's a big pillar of Forward Party as well. We support open, nonpartisan primaries, really any election reform that's going to help get us out of this mess. So with that being said, Cesar, could you just give a quick overview of, what is Yes on 3? And, how does that relate to the conversation we're having with open primaries today?
Sure. Yeah. So Yes on 3 would essentially adopt open primaries combined with ranked choice voting in the general. And so it's very similar to the one that Alaska just passed. The biggest difference would be that for us in Nevada, it would be the top 5 candidates that move to the general instead of 4. And so that's kind of what we're working on right now.
Amazing.
Dariel, I want to jump to you because we just came off a historic midterm election where for the first time in literally decades, voters sort of went away from what pundits predicted and voted with the party in power in many, many races. And the margin of victory, from what we can tell so far, is young voters who came out in droves. I believe this was the second largest turnout of young voters since after the 2018 midterms, and they made a huge difference. But we still really don't know a lot about millennials, let alone Gen Z voters. Dariel, you and Students for Open Primaries just did a major survey looking at how young voters think about politics today. What'd you find?
Well, we found a lot of things, but the two main things is, if we can have the Q1 graphic up, a large majority of people who took the survey identified as independent, 64.6% actually. And if we can go to Q10, we found that a large majority of people think that a change in how we elect our officials is necessary. So about 84.4%, which is a supermajority of people that took the survey, believe that there should be change in how we elect our officials. And some other findings that we made, large majority of people believe that closed primaries are a problem impacting young voters. And a large majority of people believe that elected leaders are more loyal to their party than their constituents. And a majority of people believe that neither the Republican or Democratic parties really represent them. And so those are some of the findings that we found from the survey that were really shocking.
I want to drill down really quickly on that first graphic that was shown at how many young people identify as independents, because there was a lot of talk coming out of the midterms focusing on young people and focusing on independents as if they're sort of separate groups. But it looks like your findings, Dariel, show that there's actually a lot of commonality between young voters and independent voters. So many young people are independent. And Cesar and Dariel, I'm interested in hearing from both of you. Why is that? Why are young people sort of, in my generation, everybody kind of voted with whatever party your family was, and that seems to be changing quite rapidly. Why do you find that to be?
Well, from the perspective of a Gen Zer right now, at the current state of today, our country is facing multiple crises. A democratic crises in how our democratic process works, and an economic crises with the cost of living going up everywhere, and a crises of climate and a global pandemic and I know people don't like it when you mention COVID, but COVID has impacted how much trust we have in our governments. And so a lot of young voters really don't care about politics that much. More, they care about people who can make the communities better to live in. They don't really care about labels. They're not Democrats, they're not Republicans, they're your neighbors, they're your friends. They live in these communities and they want the best for their communities. And so they will vote for candidates who will get the job done on issues that matter. For this midterm, the issues that mattered most was abortion, healthcare access, public education, and really the core issues that matter to voters drove who they would vote for, not the party next to their name.
Cesar, I'm curious, with everything Cesar just said, Dariel just said, what did you learn about the young vote in terms of, the initiative, the Yes on 3, as it relates to open primaries? Like, what are young people hungry for election reform? I mean, obviously based on the survey results, yes, but just, can you talk through a little bit of what your experience was like in Nevada?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that definitely like the data that Dariel provided kind of matched what we saw on the ground with young people. When I talked to volunteers, it was super rare for them to get like resistance, especially from younger folks about, this measure, because as soon as you explain it to them, it just clicked and it was like, oh yeah, this makes sense, right? And I think, young people especially, like we've kind of grown up under a government that just hasn't really functioned, like outcomes have been like disastrous compared to maybe, baby boomers or Gen Xers where like government was a little bit more competent. And so maybe like you have like a little bit more trust, but like if this is all then there's no way you're going to have faith in the process, right? And so, we definitely saw some excitement when people understand the process and say like, oh, wait, my vote would actually make a difference, right? And so we're hoping that as more people learn about it, then it's just going to, continue to grow.
Yeah, that's super, super interesting. I think something that from Forward Party's perspective that we're really learning, it's just that right now the parties think that they own your vote, where, with open primaries, with RCV, with election reform initiatives that, Open Primaries is supporting and Forward Party, will be able to give young voters the ownership of their vote again. Right now, in the midterm election, the messaging from the left and the right was, either you're got like vote blue or die. And if you're on the far right, it was basically like the extreme messaging of, the Democrats are going to ruin the country. It's like, that's not enough. So we need the intricacies and the nuance that results from open primaries and RCV.
It's funny you say that, Ollie, because if you look at the actual history of primaries, the parties have spent a number of years recently distorting that history, claiming that the primaries are theirs. They're not. And in fact, they were not created for the parties. They weren't even called party primaries when they were created. They were called direct primaries. And the reason why they were created was because before primaries existed, the parties would spend all the time before the general election picking the candidates, creating backroom deals, creating sort of corrupt avenues towards setting agendas. And when the people showed up in November, everything was decided for them. So they created a primary so they could set the agenda, so they could pick the candidates. And the parties fought that for years. And Cesar, I'm kind of curious. You just went through the first, couple of years of working through this in Nevada. How did the parties react in Nevada to your push to try to take the primaries back for the people?
I mean, so for us, both parties came out against it, or like top officials from both parties. And so at the beginning, it was mostly the Democratic establishment that raised like $1.5 million and all that kind of stuff. But that was definitely one of the talking points, especially from like the partisan people, that they would say a lot. When you mentioned this, is that, oh no, like the parties, the primaries are for the parties to pick the best candidate, and like they describe this like ideal scenario that sounds kind of nice, but like it's just not put into practice. And so when you kind of look back at the history, it's like, no, like why should the parties pick the representatives? It's the people that should, right? And then when you present it like that, to most people, it just it kind of clicks.
And Dariel, do you think that what Cesar just explained about giving the power back to the constituents, to the voter, is that something that the young voters would resonate with, or maybe even from your perspective, like giving back the ownership to the actual voter? Is that something that maybe Gen Z and younger would be like, hell yeah?
I mean, yeah, hell yeah. I mean, we're seeing the same like trends happening in states like Nevada, Alaska, and even legislators like Maine, where we're seeing like a large group of young voters standing up and advocating for a system that works for the voters, not for the party. Because I really am strongly like opposed to the belief that parties are entitled necessarily to like a vote simply because of their age, or their race, or their creed. And I believe a lot of other people in Gen Z also agree with the fact that they would rather vote for the people, not the party, and that the parties aren't entitled to their vote. And a large majority of young voters in the survey also agree with me on that. And so I believe like the sentiment around like reforming our system is that they would much rather have elections work for the people than the parties.
Right. And, open primaries and other election reform policies are really what it's doing is changing the incentive structure. Because right now, there's really no incentive for a career politician to actually follow through on what they campaigned on. And it kind of makes sense that they're loyal to their party because it's like that's their employer. And we need to reverse that. The voter employs you, right? So that's what makes me really excited about these systemic reforms that we're talking about today.
I agree, and it also means that you have to let them vote in the first place, right? It all starts with letting folks vote in the first place, and millions of voters are shut out in closed primary states, including, and then this number just is shocking to me. Over 50% of young people, millennials and Gen Z, are registered independent and shut out in closed primaries. That impacts every election. Cesar, you were about to say something.
No, I was just going to add or validate the example that Ali said, because one of the things that happened here in Nevada is that one of the things that we did is we reached out to tons of legislators, as many as we could. And we said, hey, do you support this? And a lot of them actually did, in private, but they couldn't publicly say anything because the party bosses told them like, hey, if you support this, we're gonna cut you off, and we're gonna primary you, whatever. So a lot of these politicians are like hostages to the system or to the people on top who are making these kind of decisions that don't help most of us. So it's definitely happened, and it's gonna happen, to most states that try to pass this. So
Right. The system right now doesn't reward good behavior,
Right.
Yeah.
Cesar, you just sort of got past this first hurdle, but you're going to have to now pass open primaries and ranked choice voting again in Nevada.
Yeah.
So walk us through, what are the next 2 years going to look like? And are they in Nevada, and are they going to look any different than the campaign that just won the first stage?
Yeah. So, for the next 2 years, a lot of our focus is going to be on education, right? Because since we already qualified it, we don't have to gather signatures or anything like that. So that gives us more time to just explain what it is. And the first half, a lot of the focus was on the open primary and how it affected 600,000, Nevadans who don't have a say. And so, one of the things that we saw, there was a lot of desire for people they wanted to hear about ranked choice voting, right? And so, which was good, because it's cool to see that, people are excited about this. And so that's going to be a lot of our focus, doing a lot of like tabling events, handing out flyers, hosting big and small events where people rank their pizza, beer, tacos, that kind of thing. So we'll be doing tons of that.
I love that. There's so many practical use cases for ranked choice voting. I know that's not what we're talking about today, but I love the approach of just like, hey, let's rank our beers. Say like, you'd kind of use RCV in everyday situations all the time. Like, if they're out of your 2 top ice cream flavors, somebody will ask you, okay, well, if they don't have those, what do you want? So like, that's the concept of RCV and just everyday practice.
I wanted to, it's sort of not lost on me, Cesar, that both you and Dariel are not just young leaders, but you're young Latino leaders. And not that you necessarily speak for the whole Latino community, but, one of the communities that most confounds both parties is the Latino community. Neither party seems to be able to figure them out. And I'm curious, why do you think that is? And what is it about the Latino community and young Latinos in particular that both parties don't seem to understand?
Yeah, I can go first. And I apologize for my relocation. I got kicked out of the library that I was in before at my university. And hopefully my echo is not that bad. But I'm hearing a lot more of the same rhetoric from the parties, that Latinos don't want to vote. And I don't speak on behalf of all Latinos. I know several actually don't want to vote, but it's my belief that a majority of them do. It's a sacred right. For many Latinos, they come from circumstances where they may not have that right to vote. And so voting is important, but it's also important to have something that energizes Latino voters to get out and vote. The major parties don't invest in Latino outreach, or they don't have a presence in Latino communities. And I think that's the wrong way to go about it. Latinos don't show up sometimes just because they don't have really anything energizing to go out and vote for. The parties send low quality candidates, and third parties that do send candidates that are genuinely concerned about issues that relate to Latinos don't really have a fighting chance in a closed primary state. And so I believe one misconception is that Latinos don't want to vote. A majority of them do.
I'm curious, Cesar, not only do the parties relate to young people and Latinos with a lot of consternation, but they also relate to independents with some of the same consternation. And it's no mistake, I think, that large numbers of Latinos are independent, as well as large numbers of young people. Why is that?
Sure. So, I mean, I'll share my, personal experience, and I think it might resonate with, with some people, but obviously not speaking for the whole community. But I think a lot of people in general are just, fed up with the two-party system who hasn't produced results, not just for the Latino community, for any community, really. And so I think Latinos' history in America is different than other groups. And so we're not really like attached to a party, and I think we also come from governments where we distrust the government, right? And so I think like Dariel said, Latinos hold the right to vote very sacred, to our culture. But if they don't believe that the system's gonna produce results, and like, what's the point of voting, right? And I think it's a very similar reason to why young people don't vote in higher numbers, right? Because like, what's the point? It doesn't make a difference, right? And so I think, if we give people a reason to believe that things will change, and hopefully something like question 3 will do something like that, then I think you're going to start to see a lot of these numbers, with every community, start to go up.
Yeah, definitely. Well, before we wrap this up, I want to, ask both of you, Dariel and Cesar, what advice from your experience, with open primaries, open primaries for students, as well as, Cesar, your work with Forward Party and Yes on 3, what advice would you give a young voter, a young activist who wants to get involved in something like this?
Yeah, I can go ahead and start off. Students for Open Primaries does a lot of work in the realm of educating folks on open primaries and how primaries in general impact young voters. But we also do a lot of research on it. And so students who are like interested in spreading the word about primaries and how open primaries can benefit young voters can get involved. If that sounds like something that they're interested in, to studentsforopenprimaries.org. There's a nice bright button on the top corner that says get involved. If you click on that, it brings you to our page where you can learn about hosting an event in your community, signing up for a newsletter, or even putting your writing to good use and writing an op-ed in your local community. And we can help from step A to step Z. And so anybody who's interested in that can also reach out to me personally. My email is dariel@openprimaries.org. And then you can also visit studentsforopenprimaries.org.
Amazing.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I think for me, like, if people want to get involved through the Forward Party, then you can go to theforwardparty.com, and then through there you'll find your state. If you want to help Nevada specifically, you can go to yeson3nv.com, and then you'll find ways to get involved. But if you want to get involved in your specific state, I would suggest looking for organizations who are already working on this, like Open Primaries, the Forward Party, Rank the Vote, the Institute for Political Innovation. That's like the way it happened is we got some local organizers, we met up, and then because Andrew Yang had Catherine Gale on his podcast, we were familiar with her work, and then one of our volunteers reached out to them and said, "Hey, do you guys want to work together on it?" And like literally, that's how it started, right? And so a lot of it is just finding other people who are already doing the work, and then just being like, "Hey, how can I help?"
Love it. Yeah, my advice to really anybody who's just curious about what we're doing, you don't have to like sign your soul away to Forward or Open Primaries. Sign up for our communications, attend a meeting, just dip your toes in the water. I think you'll enjoy what you learn. And yeah, anybody have any closing remarks, Jeremy?
Yeah, I mean, similarly, if you want to get involved or just learn more about primary reform and open primaries, the rules in your state, what's going on in various state campaigns all around the country. There are literally dozens of state campaigns on open primaries happening all over the country right now. And you can sign up for our newsletter, learn more, get involved. You can do it all on openprimaries.org. And I just want to really thank the Forward Party for having us. We really appreciate all the work that you do, and we're really excited to be partners in this.
Likewise. Thank you, everybody. This was super fun. I hope we do this again. I think we're going to for sure. And yeah, if anybody who's listening, if you want to find out more, forwardparty.com, openprimaries.org?
.org. Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yep. And studentsforopenprimaries.org.
There you go. Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, everybody.